Welcome to the Hangar podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. In this engaging two-part series, Jeff Ratkovich and I sit down for a conversation with a close friend, former colleague, and my certified flight instructor at Ontario PD, Kevin Hart. Kevin is a seasoned professional in aviation and law enforcement with a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from UC Santa Barbara. Kevin brings a solid academic foundation to his multifaceted career. Kevin's journey began as a fixed-wing CFI before transitioning to law enforcement, where he served as a deputy sheriff in the Orange County Sheriff's Department. His subsequent move to the Ontario Police Department marked over 14 years of dedicated service, during which he ascended from patrol to aviation. Kevin's roles included serving as a tactical flight officer before earning the coveted position of pilot. Notably, he also assumed the pivotal role of the aviation unit's primary certified flight instructor. Relocating to Nashville in 2021, Kevin continued his contributions to aviation, working as a HIMSS pilot for Air Evac. Kevin and Jeff are now both pilots for the Tennessee Highway Patrol, with Kevin based out of Nashville and Jeff in West Tennessee. Kevin is enjoying life outside of California, living in the country and working on his property, tending to the chickens, fishing, and fantasizing about surf trips. Thank you to our sponsors, Metro Aviation, Precision Aviation Group, and Bell. Cheers.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, Jon Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Kind of moving forward, talking about some of the experiences that you had working there. We got a lot of opportunities to work some really interesting pursuits and critical incidents. Is there something that you can recall that was kind of memorable for you for some reason? One of the incidents that you worked.
There was one kind of towards the end, I think, of my time there. Michelson and I, Jimbo, I think I was flying. I think he was a pilot at the time, but I think we were flip-flopping. So he was in the TFO seat that night. And it was just a disturbance down in, I think it was Sector 7, maybe 8. Kind of, those like rural ag properties kind of in the south end of the city. And it was long and kind of narrow, but with like trailers and semis and just a bunch of junk in it. And somebody, I think, called in a disturbance, like a 415. And so we get a long eye on it. And there's somebody in the middle of the field and like behind a car. And then there was a house just, I guess, north of the car. And he's obviously talking to somebody in the house. So that guy comes out. And he meets him at the bumper of the car and just blasts him. He had a shotgun and he just shot him. He shot him. And then he runs around the car, gives him a head stomp, and then shoots him again. And I couldn't believe it. That was like a homicide real time, and we're over the top of it. Of course, we got it on recording, and it was at nighttime, so it was on the infrared, and it was real dark down there. But yeah, I just couldn't believe that what we just witnessed. And then some woman comes running out down to a fifth wheel down at the end of the property. So it was probably some kind of love triangle, I would imagine. But yeah, I couldn't believe what we just saw. Because usually you get there after the fact.
You talk about the effectiveness of an air crew and the resources and safety they provide for the folks on the ground. That's a prime example of how you guys, one, protected the officers that were inbound to that. Because as you said, it was put out as a disturbance call or something. It wasn't at the time a homicide. So if I recall right, you guys put traffic out, relaying what you had just witnessed. You guys set up a perimeter, contain the suspect, prevent officers from going in there to contact the guy, get a team in place, and ultimately get him in custody. But so many things there were done correctly because of the skill that you guys had as an air crew working together. That was great. That was probably one of the most impactful incidents that I remember. Even in my entire time at Air Support was that. So good job.
Yeah. Jim did a great job. I just kept us over it, but he was a canine handler for a long time. And a really good, sharp TFO, and he did a fantastic job on that call. Like you said, to your point, keeping everybody safe. Everybody wants to rush in there, but he did a good job of kind of keeping everybody calm, preventing people from going in there, plugging holes in the perimeter, and they eventually went in and got the guy, I think. But yeah, he did a great job on that call.
Had you guys not been overhead, I'm sure that suspect would have fled, and we would have spent a lot of time and money looking for that guy down the road. We can, say we. I mean, you guys contained him to that yard, and man, it just saves another contact down the road from going south. You never know what someone like that is going to do when they're confronted by law enforcement, an unknowing traffic stop or pedestrian check or something. So the fact that you guys could contain him and take him to custody that night is a big deal. So yeah, again, well done on that.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Changing gears to the funny. I know your memory may not serve you well, but I can think of two funny things that you and I work together. So I imagine you got something funny in store for what you remember from air support.
Yeah, I know you have a couple in mind, and the one that I think is just the funniest, and other people may not see it quite as funny, but God, we were in legitimate tears. I think it was a burglary call of I think it was a Verizon wireless like little service shack down on like, I don't know, 16 or 1700 block of East Holt, right before Vineyard, and I think somebody reported seeing somebody or two on the property, and the door was open. And, we got there, we could see that the door was open. It was at night, and they had a pretty good search team. So it must have been that they thought somebody was there still, because they were searching. They had a good team. And, when it was pretty much done, I think, Bryce was on that call, and you and Bryce were really good friends. And I can't remember if I was flying or you were flying. I think I was, because you were talking to Bryce, but I could have that flip-flopped. We sent him on this little wild goose chase. It was this property with like just debris and like tons of wood. And it was probably a mess down there, just walking through weeds and trash. And we sent him on this hot spot just to check it. It wasn't, we didn't feel like it was truly be somebody. It was probably like a cat or something. And so we sent him down there to check it out, and he goes, "Hey, yeah, there's nothing here." And I think you got him on channel 2 and said, "Yeah, I think it was just your mom's big stank panties or something." Because you guys are into your mom jokes. And oh my gosh, man, we could not barely contain ourselves. It took everything to keep that thing upright.
What's funny is that call is taking place just north of kind of the departure end of Ontario Airport, literally just north, like maybe half mile north of that departure corridor.
Yeah, it's right there.
And we're dying as we're, probably in the worst place in the entire city for that to happen. So that was gold. The other one I'll bring up, which is funny, and I think everybody's done this. You fly over and you mean to heckle somebody on the loudspeaker, whether it's a suspect running from you or whatever the case is, and you accidentally, instead of going out on the loudspeaker, you go out over the primary dispatch channel. So
who hasn't done that?
Right.
So
it's like a rite of passage.
Yeah.
The San Bernardino County Sheriff's had a jail facility called West Valley, and we used to go. We'd fly around the perimeter of that, kind of safety check the perimeter, and you could always see the inmates inside as you fly over. And every once in a while, Kevin would get on and say something to make fun of him a little bit. And one day we fly over the facility, and he gets on channel, or on the PA. He gets on channel 1, the primary dispatch channel, and goes hokey pokey, bro, to the inmates. Well, he thinks it's the inmates, and then the dispatcher comes back. It's like last unit on channel 1, and Kevin and I just started laughing, just like the time before.
Yep. Always know where you're transmitting on.
So anyways, that's the stuff that makes coming to work so fun, is when you've got a partner that you enjoy working with, and in the times when you can joke about and have fun about the things you're doing, you take advantage of it. And I always loved that. So good times there. Fast forward a little bit. You decided to leave California and move to Tennessee. Can you talk about your decision to do that and some of the factors there?
That was, we moved in March of 21, but I think we'd started kicking around the idea in late summer of 20. So the whole COVID thing was going on in California. It was really locked down and strict. And, you start looking around, and I think we saw early on, like, we didn't really buy into any of it. And you start looking around and seeing these other states that are like doing things different. And, we'd thought about leaving California years prior, and it just never worked out. It wasn't, the timing wasn't right. And so I'd asked my wife, after we'd come back from a mandatory meeting at the station, and it was kind of like the straw that kind of broke the camel's back, so to speak. Like, all right, I think it's pretty clear it's time to leave. Which was wild because I'd always assumed, I'm in the dream spot. We're in a neighborhood we want to be in. My commute to work is like 12 minutes. I'm right down the freeway. I work with a bunch of great people, excellent aircraft, good maintainers, beautiful facilities. Like, why would I leave this? And we just felt like kind of like a calling. Like, all right, let's go pursue something different. So I had known, enter Jeff Ratkovich here. I had known Jeff had left Riverside and was living in Tennessee. And the funny thing is, I'd never met Jeff. Like, we would hear him, like he alluded to, on Bravo, like the air-to-air frequency in Southern California. And we'd always joke, because he went to the academy with the Rock.
Yeah. Yep. Jeff Every.
Yep. And so we'd say, oh, the Colonel's working tonight, because his last name sounds like a Eastern European colonel. Like, oh, the Colonel's working tonight. And so I'd never met him, but I was certainly aware of him and knew all the great things he was doing over at Riverside. And on top of flying, like running their social media stuff, which I always thought was like very, very well done and clever. I reached out to him and said, hey, how's it going out there? Like, do you like what you're doing? And, and he loved Tennessee and loved the people he was working with at the base there in Obion County in Troy. And so that got me real excited, like, okay, he's doing it. He did what I'm doing here, and now he's making a living for himself in Tennessee. So I asked my wife, I said, hey, what do you think about moving to Tennessee? And we don't know anybody here. And we both born and raised in Southern California. So we're leaving our roots, and her response really shocked me. She was like, well, I'd rather do it sooner as opposed to later. And I just couldn't believe it. But one of the requirements for AirVac is you have your instrument rating in the helicopter. And so I did not have that. None of us did. I thought, well, all right, if we're going to do this, we spent some time thinking about it and praying about it. If we're going to do this, then I'm going to have to pay out of pocket and go get my instrument rating. So, we decided that's what we're going to do. So I went down to Leo Bell's school at Riverside at California Aviation Services, and they put me with an instructor named Kristen, and we got my instrument rating done. I think it was my check ride was done a little bit before Christmas of 2020. At that point, I think probably sometime in January, I applied to AeroVac. And I think initially I applied to a base opening in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, which was the only opening, I think, at the time. And man, by the grace of God, I did not get that base. I think a news pilot from Southern California ended up getting that job.
Well, because when you told me that you dropped your application for the Muscle Shoals base, I was like, bro, we're gonna have an opening at our base, because we had a pilot that had not made training or something, and so he never even showed up to our base. And so I told Kevin, and then I called our regional director for our region, and I said, hey, I got this buddy, let's back up just a second, because Kevin had already said, like, he and I had never met in person, like we'd never been in the same room with each other, and he's messaging me from his from Instagram, which didn't have his full name on there, and so I knew it was Kevin, and I knew it was Hart, but I'd forgot, like, when somebody goes, hey, what's his name? And you're like, so Stuart goes, hey, what's your buddy's name? And I'm like, Kevin. He was like, what's his last name? And I was like, and I drew a blank, and then he's like, oh, he's a real good buddy. I was like, I didn't say he was my good buddy. He was my buddy, It was funny, but,
yeah.
Anyway, so, I said, hey, he's interested in, he wants to move to Tennessee, and he put in for the Muscle Shoals base. And, I knew that this other guy wasn't going to make it. And he said, well, that posting is going to come out in a couple of days. So tell your buddy to, your real good buddy to call me. So I gave him Stuart's number, and then that spot opened up, and Kevin put in for that one and got it. So
it's funny you talk about this, and you and I were partnered up. Kevin and I were partnered up at this time, flying together. So I'm getting kind of real time updates as this is progressing. And of course, I'm hoping it doesn't happen because I don't want to lose Kevin. And, I think calling his, I don't know if you got a background investigator, but I'm telling him, I'm going to call and frag you and tell him he's really bad, and trying to keep him as much as we can. But I give you a lot of credit, and Jeff too, to back up for Jeff. I remember talking to you when you were still at Riverside PD, and you had mentioned that you were considering moving to Tennessee. And I'm like, wow. Because a lot of people at the time were considering leaving the state of California for obvious reasons. And you guys both had the bravery basically to do it. And a lot of folks want to do that, but it's difficult. Like you said, you've grown up in Southern California. Your roots are here. To leave all of that to go somewhere that's kind of foreign for a job you don't know and a crew you don't know. Can you talk about, both of you guys, like some of the challenges that you faced in doing that, and kind of what the end result was?
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completions Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs, including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
For me, just going into law enforcement, I started off at when I was 33 years old. I was a airline mechanic, and, was like good seniority and all of that. So I remember when I left, aircraft maintenance to go into law enforcement, and I showed up the first week in the pre-academy. And I think I was just telling Kevin this story not too long ago about, they started assigning us memos to write and giving us homework, and I hated writing at that point. And I remember I came home and I told Jennifer, I looked at her, and I've got a wife and 2 kids, and I just left my airline job to start this job in law enforcement. And I came home and I was like, I don't think I can do this. And she was like, well, you have to do this. Like, you don't have a choice. And it's kind of that same apprehension, because now here I am, like Kevin said, we're in this dream spot, good seniority in my unit. I was, one of the senior guys in the unit at the time. And here I am. And when I left, I was the senior guy in the unit. And here I am leaving this job that I know and am very comfortable in, to go off to, granted it's, flying helicopters, but in a totally different environment, in a different, part of the country, and different aircraft, doing a different mission. And, and it's Part 135. So there's a whole bunch of other, requirements that we didn't have to worry about flying Part 91, as a law enforcement pilot. And so it was a little intimidating leaving, and I didn't have anybody that I could say like, hey, what's the training like? What's life like at the base, or any of that. And so I kind of just, jumped in both feet. And then in addition, moving my family, 2,000 miles away, all of that, and the timing of having a house built, and, it was a lot. And, I really give Jennifer a lot of credit, for that process, because we're planning, she pretty much, the build of the house, all the finishing, and, everything that all the, doors and door handles, and everything, we had to pick out, and Jennifer was really good with all that stuff. And then on top of it, we had to pack up our home and sell it, and, all of this stuff, and time it just perfectly. And, Kevin alluded to it earlier, kind of just put it in, God's hands, and said, if this is going to work, it's going to work. And, we'll figure it out as we go. And that's kind of what we did. And the way things kind of fell into place for us, it was just perfect timing. Everything was perfect timing. I couldn't have planned it better than the way things went for us. And again, just like Kevin, moving to an area where we knew nobody. It was really just us, and my mother-in-law moved with us, so we had her out here too. But the three of us and Perry, and it was it was you just got to do it. It's like ripping the Band-Aid off. You just got to jump in full bore, because really there's no turning around once you make that decision to move like that. I mean, I guess you could move back, but it's going to be, I think, just as hard if you decided, nope, this isn't for us. So we made it work.
And you think about some of the most stressful things as an adult. One is packing up and moving, and two is starting a new job. And you guys both did both of those things in a short amount of time. So the challenge that you faced doing that, it's got to be a huge obstacle to overcome. But cool, you guys both did that. Kevin, anything to echo on the move from California to Tennessee?
Well, it's all very similar to what Jeff said, because our experiences were very similar. Both senior in the unit. You have a good position. Everything's kind of right where it should be, and on paper, it's like, why would you ever want to leave this? And we did, and I think I had the benefit of having Jeff there, kind of going like a big brother, going out in front, and so I could ask him questions about. He was very instrumental in helping me get the job at Aerovac, from what the training is like to even what the interview process was going to be like. So, I'm super thankful to Jeff for that. And then, once we'd moved, like you're saying, it's a huge job. And we packed up that house and drove cross country with our families and with the help of our families, landing in a completely foreign environment, knowing nobody. And then both Jeff and I lived in or around Columbia, Tennessee, and our base was almost 3 hours from our house. And so, the schedule was 7 on, 7 off, 12-hour shifts, and he and I both lived at the base. So you add that to moving your family to somewhere completely different, and then we're gone half the month. That was a stressor on, the family. And I love the fact that Jeff and I actually were partners. We were hitch partners. We had the same schedule, just opposite times of the clock. If he was the day pilot, I was the night pilot, and we'd come back in 2 weeks and I would be the day pilot and he was a night pilot. And so I think that really helped kind of alleviate some of that like anxiety about being in a new place, starting a completely new job. You're sitting around at this base, and it's probably the nicest base in the whole company. It's not just a double wide trailer. A base in the box, how they call it. It's a nice structure. There's nice bedrooms, bathrooms, very tall ceilings. Like, it's great. But still, you're not with your family. And all the med crew there are great. Like, it's the best it could possibly be. But it's new and it's foreign. And it was great having Jeff there because, we had very similar backgrounds. And I think that helped a tremendous amount.
Yeah, we used to sit around and, it was, like you said, it was actually kind of fun because, we lived there. So, if I was on duty, Kevin was off, he'd go back to his room, sleep, whatever, like if he was the night pilot and I was the day pilot. But then he'd come out in the living room and, we'd all hang out and watch television or, joke around or play cards or, whatever. I mean, we had, like I said, it was kind of like, I don't know, going to camp or something with your bud, so we'd cook and, for the crew and it was kind of like a little, home away from home, so to speak, and having similar backgrounds and knowing a lot of the same people and stuff, we had a lot in common. So yeah, that was a good environment for us both.
It seems like a common theme that I hear in folks that are retiring from law enforcement aviation is to go and transition into HIMS as a retirement gig. Can you guys talk about some of the challenges that you experienced flying, or moving from law enforcement flying to flying HIMS?
Yeah, it's a very different. It's just all reactive. It's kind of like a fireman. You're sitting around there at the base and you wait for those tones to go off, and then it's time to go. You check your weather and do your RA and that kind of thing. And if you can take it, you go. And it was very, kind of stressful at first. Like when those tones go off, you get this like shot of adrenaline, and my heart would like palpitate, like, holy moly, like, okay, where are we going? What are we doing? How much is this person going to weigh? How far away is it? It's all very new because you go from doing patrol flights in your little box, right? Like we did in Ontario and Riverside, to you could go pretty far in new places. And so that's kind of stressful too, because you're going to all these new helipads and landing zones, different radios, a new aircraft. I'd never flown a long ranger, and so the rotor system spins the other way, and so that caused me some stress too at first.
No. The A-star spins the other
way. So it was different in that you could go from doing nothing to going to some critical call. Not that you don't do that in patrol flying, but it's just different.
I think the biggest thing, especially for guys like us that were municipal law enforcement, we always called it in Riverside like flying the fishbowl, because you're like a goldfish like circling around inside the fishbowl, like just that little area. And if you've ever had a goldfish, the reason why I say it is when you take a goldfish out of a small fishbowl, put them into a bigger fish tank, they'll still sit and fly, like swim that little circle until they realize that there's more out there. With what we're doing, it was all pretty much cross country now, so you're really having to plan fuel, and out here you've even got to really pay attention to the weather a lot more than we had to worry about in Southern California, because obviously you might be going to Nashville, or you're going to Little Rock, or you're going to St. Louis, and so you're flying a lot longer distances, and the weather's going to play a much bigger factor than if you're just taking off and flying around the same 60 square miles or 100 square miles. That being said, the story I need to tell is Kevin shows up at the base, and now I'm his shadow pilot, so he and I are together for that first week while he's working day shift, and I'm just there to kind of guide him, make sure everything's good. Well, he had done his orientation flights with two of our other pilots, and so they went down. I think y'all went to Memphis and Jackson, and so he hadn't gone to Nashville yet. And Nashville's like probably one of the more likely destinations that we're going to be taking patients to. And there's a few things you need to know, like where we get fuel at, because it's not actually at an airport. It's like landing in a junkyard. So, well, it's right next to a junkyard, but it's in this dark hole next to this junkyard is where you're going to get fuel. And we had like a fuel pad there, and landing on the roof of Vanderbilt Hospital, there's a few things you need to know about that and some of the other hospitals in the Nashville area. So Kevin hadn't been there when he did his orientation. So I'm like, hey, we'll go over that. So that first morning we're sitting there and I'm briefing him, and, we're looking at satellite imagery of, the different locations in Nashville. And I said, it's quite conceivable your first flight will be to Nashville. It wasn't my first flight, but I had recently had gone, which is kind of a not very common location for us to go to, is Louisville, Kentucky. And I was like, I'm not going to overwhelm Kevin and tell him about Louisville. Cause I mean, come on, man, that's crazy talk. So, I think it was like that first day Kevin didn't get a flight. And so it was the next morning and the tones dropped, and it was to go up to a town called Hickman, Kentucky, and pick up a patient. And it was a scene flight. So you don't really know, if it's a transfer flight, they'll tell you, hey, you're picking up at this hospital, you're taking them to this hospital. But on a scene flight, you don't really know what you've got until you get in the air, because they don't tell you what the patient, is. You just know it's a scene. So he leaves and departs up to Hickman, Kentucky. And so I'm running the scenarios through my head, like, okay, if it's a cardiac, he'll probably go to Paducah. That's like a 20-minute flight from Hickman. No big deal. If it's a trauma, probably go down to Memphis. That's, about an hour, a little over an hour flight from Hickman. And then long shot Nashville, and I'm like, well, at least I briefed him up on Nashville. And Kevin gets up to Hickman, and I get a text from him, and he's like, bro, we're going to Louisville. And I was like, no friggin' way. So turns out it was the same patient that I flew, because I picked this guy up in Hickman as well. And he had some, I don't know, something like a brain surgery or something in Louisville, Kentucky. And so that's where he needed to go, because it was whatever condition he was suffering from, it was, related to that. So now it's like that movie Apollo 13, like Kevin's flying along going to Louisville, and I'm texting him like screenshots of what the helipad looks like in at University of Louisville. I'm, telling him about the frequencies and stuff. Well, we hadn't even gotten into like the Technosonic, radio system, and how you switch from, like, we have different zones for different regions of the country to hit our towers. And so pretty soon, Kevin goes Nordo with CENTCOM, because he couldn't get, I guess the radio locked up, something happened. So now I'm getting text messages from the med crew, and they're like, hey, Kevin, they're like, poor Kevin, he's got, we can't get on the tower frequencies to talk to, our dispatch. And they needed to make a patient report, and they couldn't do it. So now I'm calling the hospital, and they're texting me whatever medical lingo to tell the hospital. It was all comedy, man.
Meanwhile, you got two F-16s flying on either side of you.
Yeah. Right. Well, no,
I mean, my wings.
Yeah. They're punching off flares off his nose. But so I call our CENTCOM, our dispatch, and I'm like, hey, 143 is having some issues, with their radios, trying to get on the tower frequency, and they're tracking him. I mean, they can see where he's at on the like the flight tracking system that the company uses. But they're like, oh yeah, he's fine. But I'm calling the hospital, and I'm like, hey, just bear with me. I'm a pilot. I'm going to give you a patient report for this crew that's like 5 minutes out from landing at your hospital. And then, so they get up there, and Kevin lands. And the unique part about this helipad is that it's got this little thing called the keyhole, which is where you're supposed to park the helicopter. And it's tight, and it's got a fence all the way around it, like a chain link fence. And then there was like scaffolding right next to that. I think it was still there when you were there.
Yeah.
It was there when I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were doing construction. So there's this scaffolding up along the side of the building. And I remember when I landed there, and I parked in that scaffolding, and I looked up through the greenhouse, and I could see like construction workers looking like directly down over the top of me. I thought that was kind of unnerving. But anyway, so Kevin calls me, and he's like, I was like, hey, so shoot your approach to the main center of that helipad and then park in the keyhole. And he was like, he calls me, he's like, yeah, he was like, nope. He's like, yeah, that didn't happen, man. He's like, I'm just sitting on the main pad. And then while he's talking to me, he goes, hey, does Louisville PD have a black and yellow helicopter? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. And I was thinking, who is it? Oh, it's PHI, And so it was PHI Air Medical. And then I can hear this 407, and it's getting louder and louder. I'm like, are they landing there? And he's like, yeah. And this guy came in and like hovered down into this hole while Kevin, and I was like, hey, just go over there and apologize to the guy. So Kevin walks over, and he's like, hey man, he's like, sorry, this is my first day. And the guy's like, oh, no big deal. So they fly back, and they literally get back to the base. I feel horrible for Kevin, and and that's a long flight. I mean, it's like you're probably 4 hours, round trip to Louisville. And so he gets back. So I run down the road to a Mexican restaurant, get food for the crew, come back, and Kevin finishes up his paperwork. We all sit down and eat Mexican food. No sooner does he finish his food, and the tones drop again. And now he's going to Nashville for the first time. So Kevin got thrown right into the fire from the frying pan, and got to go to two places that he'd never been in a helicopter in one day. So yeah, it was pretty that was comical, and that probably one of the funniest things that I'm back there like texting him pictures and trying to explain procedures and where to get fuel and all this stuff. It was
got to rip the Band-Aid off like you talked about earlier, and you did.
Yeah,
you made it happen.
That was a full team effort. I think Jeff calls it mission control, because it was, man. Like, it was all hands on deck to get us there and back. And I think
poor Kevin.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? What that wasn't the day that you came in and you were like, I think I'm going to throw up. Like, it was so hot. I
No,
think that was
a
later
different
on.
day.
That was, yeah. Poor Kevin, that first summer, man, it hit him hard.
That humidity, man, it's no joke.
Yeah, a little different than California for sure. Well, now you guys, have come full circle. You're no longer with Air Evac. You've moved on to the Tennessee Highway Patrol, which is really cool. They've got a really cool organization, really cool air support program. Can you talk about the decision to go back there and, kind of what you're doing now?
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Well, it kind of all started like, I'm following Jeff around and I just go where he goes. I think he met Brad and Quinn at, what was it, like APSA or ALEA or something in Atlanta?
It was a Heli Expo.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So he met the chief pilot down there and one of the sergeants, and they had a good time and hit it off. And they approached him about coming to fly for them, and I guess they asked, "Hey, do you know anybody else?" Because they had a few pilot spots open, and so he asked me if I'd be interested, and we were kicking around the idea, and looking at the pay scale and what they fly, and after a bunch of text messages and phone calls, and I think separately we both went up to visit the chief pilot up there in Nashville and kind of have a face to face, because it's kind of a big move, because I had transferred bases a few times, and I was at a really good base not too far from my house, good flight volume, great crews. So it was kind of it would be a big jump for me. But I think, after talking with Brad and seeing that they are committed to that unit, because I was thinking, like, how are they making this program run with such few bodies? I mean, they have beautiful aircraft. So I didn't know if, like, the command staff was supportive of it, because I didn't know anything about the agency. And he said, no, we're looking at adding a couple of Bell 429s. And I said, oh, wow, they're definitely committed to seeing this unit be successful and serve the state and the residents of Tennessee. That was a huge, I think, moment for me when I saw that, okay, that they're serious about this. It's not like this unit's going to just dissolve and disappear, and then now I got to start back over and live away from home 7 days at a time. Jeff, I think, was first to jump in and say, yeah, I'm going to do it. And I was kind of still on the fence, but after talking with Brad and seeing their operation, that's when I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna be in too. Let's do this. And I think I've missed law enforcement flying, the mission, even though it's different here. I'm still learning about it. But it's very different from what we were doing back in Southern California. So that was kind of hard to wrap my head around too. But I think I'd missed it,
Yeah, you brought up the 429. The 429 it's if I could have any helicopter, I think that's the one I'd have. I only had an opportunity to fly in it once, but I was amazed at the smoothness of the aircraft. When you're coming into ETL, when on approach, the A-Star likes to vibrate quite a bit, and I felt like the 429 was super smooth as you're coming through ETL and slowing down. Just really impressed with the power and the overall ability of that aircraft. So really cool that you guys are flying that. Jeff, can you talk about the agency a little bit? How many folks are working there and kind of what your mission profile is? Kevin alluded to it being a little different, but just from your perspective, what's the program serve?
It's obviously the Highway Patrol statewide agency. We have 3 bases. Nashville's our headquarters, and then Knoxville, and we have a base out here in West Tennessee at the Carroll County Airport, and it pretty much serves both the Jackson and Memphis districts. So everything pretty much west of the Tennessee River and Kentucky Lake. The state's divided up into the 3 grand divisions, West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and East Tennessee. And so the 3 bases kind of align that way. Kevin said, one of his concerns was, support from the command staff. And I'll tell you, from the governor, Bill Lee down Colonel Matt Perry, the entire command staff is extremely supportive of the aviation unit. And so that was, like Kevin said, a huge deciding factor is, the worry of, well, are they going to, is this program going to go by the wayside or what? And neither of us had a whole lot of knowledge of the history of the unit at that point. And really, what sealed the deal for me was when I met with Colonel Perry, and he explained his, vision for the aviation unit and what he expected of us. As the Highway Patrol's never done this; they've never hired pilots from the outside. They've always grown guys from the inside. But unfortunately, with they had retirements that came up, and so between that and then the tragic loss of Sergeant Lee Russell, he was killed back in August of last year hit wires, and he was the pilot out here in West Tennessee. So they between retirements and tragedy, it had really depleted the unit down to where they had 2 pilots and 2 tactical flight officers, and they needed to rebuild it. And this became a solution, was to bring in experienced law enforcement aviators to fill in these gaps. And kind of we're kind of like a stopgap for them, so that they can now start kind of building the unit back up. And when I think that was the important part for me was when Colonel Perry said, that we're bringing you in on the ground level of this as we rebuild this program and get reestablished with all 3 bases. And then at the same time, the goal is to have, at least 2 pilots in each base. And there even, future plans are possibly even to have another base down in the Chattanooga area, and maybe a second aircraft for out like towards Memphis. Here in Tennessee, a lot of these, there's 95 counties in the state, and a lot of them are, pretty rural and don't have a lot of resources. And so they look to the Highway Patrol for a lot of resources. And one of them being the helicopter. We got a lot of rural areas, a lot of East Tennessee mountainous areas where people go out and enjoy themselves. And as we all know, end up needing to be rescued, needing to be found. And so, the Highway Patrol is, we have Nashville PD, Memphis PD, Jackson PD, Williamson County Sheriff's Department, Knox County Sheriff's Department. I don't think I'm missing any. Are the, counties or agencies in the state that have aviation assets. But, pretty much everybody relies on the Highway Patrol for those services. So, we don't do a lot in the way of like, California Highway Patrol. They're, we don't have fixed wing assets. It's rotor wing assets primarily, at least not, we're not doing speed enforcement type stuff like California Highway Patrol. Most of it is reactionary, and then search and rescue and support to the local counties, in each region. So it's a little bit different of a mission. We're not working shift work like we would in California, sitting at the hangar all the time on a shift. Primarily each base has a pilot and a tactical flight officer and the aircraft. And Kevin mentioned that, we have one 429 now. That's in Nashville right now, but eventually we'll have 2 more coming, probably the end of next year, it looks like. So, we're expanding the mission of the unit and the capabilities with the aircraft. We have the 2 407s, got one out here. The other one is out in East Tennessee right now. And then we've got a couple of 206s as well that are being phased out. So we do a lot. That was the other thing too. Is there's not a whole lot out there, social media wise or anything like that. With what the Highway Patrol does. So I was under the, I was almost thinking like, oh, well, they probably don't do a whole lot. And it's opened my eyes that, the Tennessee Highway Patrol aviation unit is actually quite busy with missions. So yeah, for me, it's been wonderful. The Highway Patrol has been super welcoming to us. They've needed the support in the aviation unit for a long time. Their staffing levels in the Highway Patrol all across the entire patrol have been kind of depleted over the years. They've been doing a really big recruiting push the last year, a little bit over a year, and or a couple years, I guess. But earlier this year, they got a pretty significant pay raise, which obviously has helped to bring numbers in to patrol. But it's not like you can just grab a pilot off the street and throw them in a helicopter and send them out. And we don't grow pilots on trees. So it was a wonderful opportunity that I saw. And so then I was like, Kevin, you got to come with me, because that's what we do. And and Kevin's assigned obviously to our Nashville base, and I'm out here out west. I keep trying to convince him to move out west, but so far,
well, you guys,
he won't do it.
Just within the last couple of weeks, have had a pretty significant storm roll through, a tornado that did quite a bit of damage in the area. Did you guys have a hand in the recovery efforts for any of that?
No, the most of it was, I think, here there wasn't a lot of. I think we get more involved in maybe a more significant. I mean, I know it was definitely significant. It was an EF3 that rolled through Clarksville. There wasn't a whole lot in the way of relief efforts, for aviation assets in this one. I think, mostly we're going to be mountain search and rescue. Maybe like flooding and stuff like that. When we get some major floods out here, is where you'll probably see the majority of our work being done when it comes to like natural disaster type stuff. We do have rescue hoists on the 429. We do some of that work. And then the rest of it is, pretty much patrol work, just like we would anywhere else, just basic air support to law enforcement. And then some surveillance work that we do as well.
Anything to throw on top of there, Kev?
No, I think Jeff covered it. But the thing that I want to echo is that, everybody that we've been in contact with or met along the way, in the hiring process or the training phase at the Highway Patrol have just been extremely welcoming, very friendly. I haven't met one person that's been standoffish or like not happy we're there. People all the time tell us how happy they are that we're there. So it makes it makes me feel thankful that we've been received in that way, and I know Jeff feels the same way.
Yep, 100%.
Yep, everybody, and it's just been great. I think we're kind of lucky in the fact that they've always hired or brought up from within, like Jeff mentioned. And I think that's the right way to do it. That's what we did in Ontario. And I think most law enforcement agencies in Southern California, if not the nation, bring them from within. There's a few out there I know that hire civilian pilots, and they have their reasons for doing that. But I think the right way to do it is bring them up from within. We have former law enforcement experience. It's not in Tennessee. It's in Southern California, so it's a little different. So I think we're fortunate in the timing of it all that we get to go to such a great agency and fly for them. But I do see the benefit of bringing somebody up from within, because a couple weeks ago I got to fly with Brad, and we're up cruising around Nashville, and he'd hear a call go out, and he'd whip his head around and go, "Oh, it's mile marker so-and-so. It's back that way." I don't know the streets or the roads or the exits or the mile markers, and I think that's a huge benefit. So I'm going to lean heavily on my TFOs to know that kind of stuff, because once they plug it into the Churchill, it gives us which way to go, and I can head that way. But they'll know right away where that location is.
Well, man, it's cool that you guys have made the kind of full circle move from law enforcement to HIMS, now back to law enforcement, and then you've also moved across the country to do all that. And there's a lot of folks that are in a position like I mentioned earlier, where they're maybe looking at retirement or looking to move out of one place into another, what kind of advice do you guys have for folks that are looking to go and basically do the thing that you guys did with such a big move? Like, Kev, we'll start with you.
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical Helicasts and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators.
I think probably the biggest thing in getting any job is having a good reputation and putting out a good work product, because that'll speak volumes for, you know, any say background check, or when people start looking into you and they start asking people you worked with, how is this guy? How's he to work with? Especially in aviation and law enforcement specifically, or even HEMS, you know, that I've seen several times the base harmony fully disrupted by kind of a bad apple, so to speak, whether that's a pilot or a paramedic or a nurse. You know, it disrupts that great base dynamic. Same thing can be said of any law enforcement unit. So, John, like you alluded to earlier, you know, vetting those candidates is such a huge responsibility, I think, to maintain a successful unit. So I think maintaining a good reputation and is probably, I think, one of the most important things.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head especially with the reputation and your due diligence, I guess, in looking into people, because, you know, obviously, I think we've all seen it before where somebody can hide it really well, you know, initially, and then pretty soon the wheels start falling off the longer they're there, or, you know, in the unit, and then it becomes a real problem, especially because most of our units are going to be fairly tight knit and small, and everybody's going to have to work with each other. So those are great points, Kev. You know, talking about moving and doing what we did is it's got to be buy-in from, you know, you and your wife both, and committed to doing it. Otherwise, you know, it's not going to work very well. And that's one thing that, you know, Jennifer and I really did was not only, you know, getting the buy-in, but, you know, we came out here multiple times throughout over a time before we even made the decision to pull the trigger. And one of the biggest reasons was just to come out in all 4 seasons and kind of see what what it's like out here in all those seasons. Because, like Kevin said, you know, the humidity is no joke during the summer, and you come out here in late July, August, you know, if you're not prepared for that, or again, you know, when you step off an airplane, when you get on an airplane in Southern California, and then the next time you get outside of, you know, a building is walking out of the airport in Memphis or Nashville, and it's going to hit you in the face, that humidity. Now, granted, it's because you haven't been in that environment before. And, you know, just like if you come out here in the wintertime when, you know, there's an ice storm or something like that, you know, coming from Southern California, it's going to be a huge shock to your system. And, you know, you do acclimate, but it is a good idea to kind of come out and get a feel for it and stuff. Cause like Jennifer, she was born and raised in Southern California. She'd never been in an environment like this before to live. And, you know, she was a little unsure of it at first. And the more we came out, you know, the more she fell in love with Tennessee, but also, you know, kind of got used to the weather and saw that, okay, like, you know, she's okay with the heat, but the cold is what, you know, scares her, or did. And now it's funny because, you know, the other day it was like, I don't know, 35 degrees outside or something like that. And she was like, oh, it feels great, you know, and she's outside and she's got like a sweatshirt on, you know, and she's, you know, trucking along, where before, like, you know, if it hit like 60 degrees, she's like, oh my gosh, I'm freezing, you know? So
it's all relative.
Yeah. You acclimate to it over time, but I mean, I still don't want to be out in August digging ditches in my yard or something like that, because it's pretty miserable. But I'm just glad to finally work for an agency that has air conditioning in the helicopters. So
Yeah,
I didn't get that pleasure when I was in Southern California.
Well, man, it's been awesome having you guys on. I guess I've kind of cut you off, Kev. Before we close out, anything to throw on top of that?
No, I think Jeff made a good point. Is it is a big move, uprooting your family from everything they've ever known and moving 1,800 miles to a different location. And he alluded to the fact that he had buy-in from Jennifer, and I think that's probably worth repeating because I think it would be really disruptive to your family if or a marriage if you just wanted to do that and your spouse didn't, and you just pulled the trigger and did it anyways. Kelly was on board. The kids were open to it. So everybody was kind of on the same sheet of music as far as relocating. So I think that's worth repeating. And then also, just looking back in my career in law enforcement aviation in Ontario, I feel really blessed, to work with some very talented people and make some lifelong friends. You and Michelson and Gadarian, and a host of them. Eric Widener running the unit, learned so much from Steve Valvo, and I could go on, but I feel really blessed and thankful, and even you guys to have the friendship that we do, and so it's great. I appreciate you having me on, and it's been really neat to see you guys grow this podcast. I remember when you and I were flying around, and you were kicking around the idea. I think we were at like 6 in Archibald just on a patrol flight, and we're bored out of our minds. And you pitched that idea, and I said, "Heck yeah, man! I think you guys you'd be great at this." And so it's been really neat to see you guys grow it.
You were the first person I think I even mentioned it to on that flight was the origin of it. So thank you for your encouragement and for your friendship, and Jeffrey, that goes to you as well. It's been fun to watch you guys and your journey. Talk about seeing how your life has changed just from moving from Southern California to Tennessee. Kevin, I look at you and your kids, and I'll see a video of your kids out riding quads on your property, doing stuff that you could have never done in California. So it's been neat to see that quality of life change and just experience things that you couldn't have done otherwise. That's been really cool.
Kevin's a land baron. He's got like a whole compound.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's a lot of responsibility, I'll tell you that.
Another thing I'll throw in, advice wise, I guess, for anyone wanting to move out this way is, I think the biggest thing is assimilate to your environment, assimilate to, especially if you're going to go to work, for another agency out here is, I think where people could go wrong is like coming in and like Kevin said, it's different than how we did things in California. I will those words will never come out of my mouth to like, oh, well, we didn't do it this way in California. You know what I mean? Because I think you'll definitely paint yourself into a corner doing that, and it won't be received well. I absolutely love Tennessee and everything about it and the people and is it different? Yeah, absolutely. It's different than what I experienced in California. But what I found is it's in a good way. To me, it's a very, I guess, genuine way out here that I didn't see in California. And that comes from, that goes for the people I've worked with, the people I'm working with now in the highway patrol. I would never want to come in and, tell them like, well, you should do it this way. There might be a time and a place where maybe something you could introduce like, hey, you might want to try this, but definitely I think where people go wrong is trying to force it. And I think you'd see that, I'm sure you guys probably saw it as cops in Ontario. If you had a cop that lateraled from another agency and wanted to tell you, nobody wants to hear that.
What's the saying you're hearing all the time? Don't California my Tennessee, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
It's funny because California has kind of become the sworn enemy of every citizen in every state. So many Californians are leaving and going elsewhere. You're seeing that don't California my Texas, don't California my Arizona. But I agree with you. You guys, you've done a good job of reacclimating to your environment and just exposing your families to really new and cool things. Admire you guys for making that move and for the positive changes that have come about as a result of the move. So hope to see you guys in person here pretty soon. I'll come out and visit the Land Baron in Tennessee and see what you guys are doing out there. But thanks again for joining us.
We're going to have a hoedown.
Thanks for joining us on the podcast, and we'll catch you guys later.
All right. Thanks for having me.
See you guys.
See you guys.
See you. This is the end of our 2-part conversation with Kevin Hart from the Tennessee Highway Patrol. Stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors who make these conversations possible.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completions Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs, including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical Helicasts and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators.
Thank you for hanging out to hear from our sponsors. HAI has just passed. At HAI, I found it's now called the Vertical Association International, or VAI. It'll take some time for me to get used to saying that, but I'll nail it someday. Now that we've set our sights on AppsCon, which will be held in Houston, Texas, July 29th through August 3rd, 2024, I look forward to seeing everyone. Don't forget to start booking your travel arrangements so we can continue the networking, training, and education in person. Catch you soon. Cheers.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.